Welcome everybody, this is Denny with Why Is This True and Get Wisdom, and Karl and I are back today to continue with our channeling series that we've been doing for about a year now. And today's subject is L. Fletcher Prouty, who is an author and an ex-military man. He had a career with the Air Force, and I think he retired in 1963 or 1964. And there'll be a little intro that you will have seen before you got to this part of the video about his life, a short bio. And he wrote a couple books, very insightful, influential, and in one case a very famous book. This one here, which is about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And Fletcher Prouty was actually the character, I think they called him Mr. X in Oliver Stone's movie about the JFK assassination, where they featured the main character as Jim Harrison, the attorney from Louisiana. So he wrote this book here, which is probably one of the better books to read. I think there's 600 books on the JFK assassination. I would probably put this one in the top 3 or the top 5. I really I have a lot of respect for this guy. The fact that he was an insider made him well equipped to talk about, what he could get away with talking about, and what he couldn't get away with talking about. And the other book he wrote is in the late 70s. It's called The Secret Team. It's kind of an expose on the CIA. And he wrote this in the late 70s. There's a story that I haven't really investigated too thoroughly, but the CIA apparently bought up a bunch of copies when it was put out, and I think even bought the publishing company, and then put the publishing company out of business. And there was a period of time there in the 80s, 10 years or so, when you couldn't even get a copy of this book. And then another publisher picked it up in the 90s, and then Fletcher Prouty actually did some interviews in the early 90s about his work. So he's uniquely qualified to talk about both of those subjects and the Vietnam War, and he knew Allen Dulles, and Allen Dulles is a fellow that we did an interview with. He was one of the subjects where there was an actual reptilian replacement story with Allen Dulles. So Fletcher Prouty is probably one of these guys that we could do 2 or 3 sessions with him, but we're going to do one. There's 10 questions today. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and especially you, Karl. And I want to give you an opportunity to just briefly tell everybody what we're going to do today. The process of channeling and how we contact these people. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in this case we did have to do a spirit rescue for Fletcher Prouty.
Yes, Denny, that's the case. Thank you for having this opportunity to contribute to the cause of bringing forward enlightenment and truth about some of the major things affecting humanity. And this is major. We're in a contest for the survival of humanity, in fact. We have come to learn in the course of this channeling work. When I started out as a channeler, doing intuitive work, working primarily as someone who facilitates healing for people, but bumping into unusual histories, unusual circumstances, and seeing within the Akashic records of people, being able to look intuitively, where did their problems come from? I would see encounters with aliens on a fairly regular basis, as well as about 4 to 5% of my clientele having alien implants in them. And I could see this intuitively and developed a healing protocol for their removal and to do a lot of other repair and healing for the people across the board, and have a comprehensive healing protocol I use for this purpose. So I've learned by doing and bumping into these phenomena. And because I'm able to talk with the divine realm, if you go to them with an intelligent question and you're close to understanding something, they can fill in the blanks for you up to a certain point, at least in a general way. They won't give you the keys to the kingdom and how to control the universe. They won't give you that depth of knowledge and the intimate details of the inner workings and how it's constructed and all that. But anyway, they're very helpful if you make a request. So this is the thing we're doing now, is using ourselves as an example of scholarship, considered inquiry for a high purpose, to really understand and move forward the reach of the light by shedding light on some dark corners. Anyone can improve their situation and the situation of others by reaching out to the divine realm. This is what prayer is all about. It should be about wanting things better for oneself and others by bringing love in to raise everyone up, including the wrongdoers. So we bump into them as we do these interviews with those famous figures from the past we've been connecting to. And the purpose is to take advantage of their prior history as being players, people informed, in the know, involved, who often were wanting to do a similar thing in their day and may have, but didn't make it all the way. And they had limitations, and they bumped into the fences that are built around all of us in various ways. So this gives them a chance to give a little more insight about what's happened. So I'll be reaching out as a channeler to connect with him. He became earthbound following his passing. This is something that's very common. 1 out of 3 people, in fact, do not make it back directly to the light with ease. Those third of us get stuck along the way and stay earthbound. And it's not a pleasant place to be. At a minimum, they're tumbling in the dark. And it can be worse if they're being threatened or harassed by dark spirits, which is all too common. So they need assistance, and they need it from the human side. The light always sends someone to help them. But if they're not able to see it, if they're still too low a vibration, they may not be able to cooperate with that process. And that's allowed to happen, just like a human is allowed to crash and burn. And the divine will not come in and keep you from falling into deep depression, having your life just disintegrate in every way, and maybe lead to the taking of one's own life. You have total freedom here. So you're allowed to mess things up, make mistakes, and to destroy yourself through unawareness of the possibilities and an inability to summon the energy needed. You know, some people are so beaten down by outside forces, they just get overwhelmed. And so those people often get stuck. And it doesn't take that much of a negative state of mind for this to happen. There are a number of risk factors, and sometimes just an unexpected passing where you're not really thinking about what you're going to do when your time is here, and not preparing. If you're not spiritually focused, it's harder because you don't know what to do. You're not thinking about it. So this is part of the problem as well, with so many people not believers really that there is an afterlife, or certainly a divine realm that cares for them, is watching out for them, and so on. It's not real these days to so many. So this is the purpose of the exercise, to catch up with him and to use this opportunity, now that he's back as a light being, to get more information about what may have happened. And so I know you've got a list of penetrating questions for him. So this will be probably pretty revealing. Just so people understand, it's not like putting a witness on the stand who's forced to tell everything they know under penalty. Light beings can only tell you certain things because there are lots of rules. This is a little bit like cheating because we're going beyond the veil. We're in a situation where we're being challenged right now to survive as physical humans, to grow and learn and go through a process of enlightenment to raise us up to greater heights and to transcend this current state of being into a glorious transformation. We know this is the shift in consciousness. People talk about the ascension. There are other terms that people have focused on. Those are previews of coming attractions and what is planned for humanity. In the meantime, we have people in our way. We have active interference by dark spirits and extraterrestrials. And they're holding things back. And the situation has recently turned for the worse. What we know is there's going to be handoff of management to one of the darker of the overlords from the Anunnaki, who are the most powerful, who have been interfering with us the longest, and have degraded and downgraded human, even genetically, and used us as slaves over and over again, this sort of subjugation. And there may well be a decision to eliminate humanity once they're done with us. And so this has changed things. It used to be you could come in as a light worker, do your bit, and then you go back to the light, and you plan another go-round, and you work your way through the centuries doing your bit. So there's not a big sense of urgency in that, because you look at this long history. This has been going on many thousands of years now. So everyone is kind of used to slogging along and, doing their best, but knowing that they'll get to come back again if they only get so far. And it'll probably be likely. This has changed now. What we're hearing is we have a window that's now less than 10 years to make things happen, to get the shift to a point where we tip the balance in favor of humanity by softening the resolve of these dark forces. We need the divine realm to do that. So hopefully Mr. Prouty will add a little bit to our knowledge about things that have happened in the past, what it all means for this picture. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of putting this out as part of the agenda to inform the reason for the questions we're asking. So this can come in terms of the answers.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Thank you, Karl. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. I have 10 questions, and we're probably going to get some long and detailed answers. So in the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started.
All right. I'll just take a minute to get in the required state of consciousness to make the connection, set up safety around the work. Very, very important. It's critical for channelers to be very thorough and very careful to work through the divine realm directly in what they do, because the imposters are out in force, and step right in. Anytime you go out with an intuitive outreach, you're going to encounter them, and they'll start talking to you and working with you, and then you're under their control to a greater degree because you've allowed that. And the divine realm has to stand back. It's free will, free agency. So it's just like talking to a Russian agent or something, unwittingly, and then pretty soon you're good buddies and you go into business together, and all the while there might be another agenda there, and it might be to turn the tables on you with a disclosure or something, and then you look like an idiot and a fool, and or maybe worse, you're conspiring with foreign forces and so on. So these are the games they play, and it gets people in trouble, but it keeps us limited. So I'm just doing the best I can. So you'll all have to judge for yourselves from the information what you think of it, and I'm doing my best to keep this authentic. Okay. But there are no guarantees here. This is flesh and blood, me, and I'm just a guy. So I'm trying to do it with a high purpose and from a love orientation, because I really want the best for everyone and for the truth to reign. And because I have faith, that is what will make things better ultimately. If everyone operates through love, then there's no room for darkness. There's no room for skullduggery and deceit. So
Okay.
Here we go.
Thank you.
This is Fletcher Prouty speaking.
Thank you for joining us. What were the conditions and factors that contributed to your decision to retire from the Air Force in 1964?
I was increasingly pressured about clandestine matters that I considered to be criminal in nature. And while I was not in a position to take action nor desiring to be a whistleblower, I had a crisis of conscience. And this put me in opposition to powerful figures I worked with. And there was a coming clash. And rather than be in harm's way and not be in a position to perhaps even survive, I took the easy way out. And that is the story in a nutshell. There are many, many dark doings going on within armed services, within the intelligence community in particular, and the widespread collaboration with the darkness is a major threat to everyone in the entirety of the world, not only those participating, but the innocent bystanders, the civilians who count on their government and military to keep them safe when the opposite is likely to be the end result.
Okay, thank you. In terms of undisclosed and secret operations involving the Extraterrestrial Alliance, what are the major differences between the Air Force, the Navy, and the CIA?
There is a certain amount of compartmentalization. Partly this is enforced through the institutional turf protection characteristic of all groups, but there are clandestine reasons for this as well. The limitation on knowledge and awareness keeps the secrets better, and particularly when there is rivalry between or among various factions who on paper are working together or in alignment at least, there is room for some types of cross purposes growing into enmity and a potential sabotaging of operations. And so the main reason for the separation is to keep things simple, to keep each party focused on what they are best at doing, and to bring forward the agenda, in particular of the Dark Extraterrestrial Alliance, working behind the scenes to gain mastery and total control for subjugation of humanity. So each branch of the military has its particular functions, some of which to sow discord, to create chaos in the guise of preventing and coping and containing the same chaos they cause or worsen. And in addition, to further the cause of the collaboration between military and extraterrestrial forces. This is under the guise of protecting humanity, but truly is for the purpose of creating a mercenary army capable of destroying humanity single-handedly, with the added element of mind control. This is quite feasible and is now poised and available as a weapon, having been honed and developed through centuries in various ways. It has been done on land, on sea, on air, and in space. So the forces have been trained, they are marshaled, they are ready. There are veterans recallable at any time. The infrastructure is in place. And this is all courtesy of the military industrial establishment itself to prepare the craft needed and to do the training. The intelligence community is the action arm of the extraterrestrial alliance, used to create the information to feed the beast, to provide rationalizations for world governments, to develop mistrust and hatreds of other nations and their designs, and to provide justifications for incursions diplomatically, financially, or militarily, to sow discord, to disrupt societies, destabilize their governments so that there can be chaos, and provide opportunity for predatory neighbors to come in and worsen things. So a civil unrest can turn into a guerrilla campaign of outside forces serving a separate agenda of their own, but capitalizing on the weakness of the current powers that be. And then this may justify a third party stepping in. The major savior of late being the United States of America as the so-called peacekeeper, which is a misnomer. It is a peace manager, and this is not for the growth and spread and the blossoming of world peace, but the limitation of peace through ineffectual action and acting at cross purposes to what might solve the problem, but only create new ones. This is done under the shield of politics. So politics are always blamed. The military is there as a kind of pawn, and the men and women who serve are being used in effect as slaves and minions of the darkness through the promotion of nationalism, the idea of service to God and country, to the flag, to one's nation, one's people, and often in various cultures to a religious fealty. All are tools of propaganda and manipulation. These agencies are working not for human, because they have been corrupted. Those in power are playing a game, and it is a game orchestrated via a hidden hand. This is the evil things have become. It is nothing new. This has been going on all through human history. Nothing is as it seems. The leaders are typically not who you think they are. The actions are never for the stated purposes, but for hidden reasons, and mostly to work against humanity. And this is why so many things go wrong in the world. My part in this is most unfortunate for me personally. Like many, I was involved in the power structure, served personally in close alliance with the organizations named, and have much blood on my hands as a consequence from a karmic perspective, I was one of those duped to believe this was going to help humanity and was being used, as is true of all these organizations.
Okay, thank you. Apparently, high-level and concentrated mind control and outright reptilian replacement was an important feature regarding the people that worked with you in your career. What was that influence on you personally, and what was your awareness of this during your incarnation?
I was aware of a reptilian extraterrestrial cohort. This was largely shielded from me, but I knew of their existence, and I knew there was some measure of cooperation with them, although there was mistrust and there was discussion of this. I did not appreciate at the time that the mistrust was warranted for those we collaborated with. And so this was not yet in my awareness until later in my career. And at that point is when I wanted to be more a force to bring forth awareness because of the disquieting events I witnessed. So I was not aware of the problem of extraterrestrial imposters, for example, that as shapeshifters, they can assume an exact appearance of another organism and be an indistinguishable replica of someone like a president or a military officer, and step into their role and become the replacement working directly for the extraterrestrial alliance, but seemingly continuing as normal in the role of that human figure. I did not know this could happen. And the shock to me when I learned of a greater reptilian involvement in the military collaboration was the deal breaker for me. And that is what woke me up to the possibility there was subterfuge going on here, and that this might be a false operation in its entirety. I was still unable to prove this, and so there was much frustration I felt internally, not to mention my qualms about my personal safety in harboring so much secret knowledge and taking great risks to talk about some of the prior work and programs and reveal some truths that encompassed the operations of the extraterrestrial alliance directly. So I was on that whistleblower path eventually, and that was because of my return to a greater spiritual alignment in keeping with my life purpose for coming into being in the first place, which was to advance the cause of the light and to help humanity. In the process, I was corrupted, but in the end, it was my involvement quite directly with those doings that gave me the awareness that such things were possible and enabled me to see through the trivial explanations of the establishment in covering up the crimes that happened over and over and over again. It takes one to know one is the common saying. And in my case, it was by the doing and experiencing directly that I became convinced of the rotten core that was behind the extraterrestrial military collaboration. It has resulted in the generation of new technology that is new to human. But this is a misdirection as well, and a false reassurance of a genuine, helpful agenda. It is not true that they are here to help. It is that simple. The warning needs to be sounded, and you will hear this from me again and again. I did the best I could while in my physical existence, but still did not have the precise details that would enable me to speak with authority. Now that I am back in the light and aware of many, many things and know them with certainty, I am not allowed to take the lead in providing too many factual details, because this must fall back on the shoulders of the human in the physical to ferret out, to help spread the word, to awaken others to the cause, and continue the progress forward.
Okay, thank you. With the perspective you have now as a light being, would it be accurate to say that Ed Lansdale's fate was the same as Ellen Dulles?
This is correct. The same fate befell him.
Okay, thank you. Was it in fact Ed Lansdale in the photo next to the alleged railcar bombs that you cited in your account, and can you elaborate now as to why he sent you to the South Pole in November of 1963?
This was to bear witness to extraterrestrial operations. The extraterrestrials maintain a secret base there, and this was preparation carried out well in advance of the current times, but the plan was in place for an eventual awakening to the literal truth and awareness of extraterrestrial presence. And the purpose was to make things less secret for reasons of convenience and for exerting a tighter grip on humanity and a tighter measure of control through human acceptance, and to allow things to happen more in the open. This was all subterfuge, but the seeds were planted even back in those days by bringing me along with my awareness of what was truly happening. This was something that was not openly discussed by the extraterrestrials directly with the military themselves. There was awareness of the moon base, but there was less awareness of the utilization of the Earth itself and bases on the Earth by the extraterrestrials because of the sensitivity of that subject to not give the appearance they had moved in, so to speak, and taken up residence and were occupying territory. This is always a touchy matter from a military perspective, because who controls the ground has the power, and that is what flags are all about and must represent. The idea of sovereignty is sacrosanct and deeply ingrained in the human psyche, and is the primary obligation and responsibility of the military to guarantee. So there were many clandestine things and subterfuges engaged in by the extraterrestrial alliance in working with those of us involved with the military and intelligence work to shade meaning, to misrepresent, to misguide, and to plant false information of value later on. So I was sent to witness this and did so. And this was part of my acclamation to the broad reach they came to enjoy. It was intended to impress and also to draw me tighter into their web. And in fact, worked more in the opposite way, because it was one of the events that caused alarm within me. And I could tell intuitively this was for sinister purposes and was an incursion and a violation of trust as well. And at this juncture, I realized that their word was not their bond. Their word was self-serving and could not be fully trusted. This changed things greatly for me. And so this was quite an important sequence of events, because I sensed the inner logic, the inner agenda of those around me, and knew this was not something that could be trusted or would be helpful. And those alarm bells were my intuitive awareness, but I did not have the goods on them. I did not have the specific knowledge to make a provable case of there being, in a sense, a double agent operation underway. But I knew intuitively that this was so, and that began to shape my further doings and my ultimate destiny.
Okay, thank you. So was it in fact Ed Lansdale in the photo next to the alleged railcar bums that you cited in your account?
This is correct.
Okay, thank you. Are you free now to tell us more about the Kennedy assassination that you were not able to while you were living?
While I was living, I was working from the vantage point as researcher in conventional terms, exploring documents, analyzing photographic evidence, and other types of material involved in the trail of forensics. And so this greatly limited me, because much of that material was false. It was introduced wholesale. It was altered. It was substituted for the actual elements, was manufactured to support a false narrative, or was destroyed and is unavailable still as a point of reference that could disprove the prevailing story that was promulgated by the government. So I was working largely in the dark, because those materials available were largely anticipated and combed over and organized in such a way to create a plausible theory, and also to create some confusion as well. This is always the case in forensic work and police work in general. There are multiple plausible suspects. There are many possible trails of evidence, and often false leads are generated that look quite intriguing and will fit a novel theory of the crime that ultimately turn out to be coincidental. This is one of the greatest examples in the case of the Kennedy assassination, because being in the center of this vortex of conflict in the tensions globally among human players, as well as the manipulation and subterfuge by the nation state controllers, and in addition, the extraterrestrial alliance pulling the higher level strings behind all that happened. There were so many false figures to point towards as potential motivation for an assassination. It is a wonder he was not dead long before the actual event, with so many plausible enemies working to undo him or wanting his demise. This is the beauty and the logic of the chess game the extraterrestrial alliance plays with humans as living pawns in the process. They create all this chaos. They create the divisions among humans. And then it is only logical to human mind that someone picks up a gun and takes a life, even of a great and exalted figure of power. The reason it happens is never human alone. And this is the great lesson and teaching of the Kennedy assassination. Despite all the plausible human figures with an axe to grind and reason for revenge or for political advantage or to cover up their own misfortunes and imminent change in status, that by removing that power figure, everything might change in an instant, and then new players would come in and old issues and agendas be forgotten in the confusion, who had a reason to kill him. In spite of all that, it was because of the extraterrestrial alliance and their agenda that this event took place. All who had a hand knowingly in constructing the plot, or who benefited subsequently in serving the cover-up that took place, did so by manipulation through the workings of the extraterrestrial alliance. That is the true conspiracy here. The CIA is controlled by the extraterrestrial alliance. The Secret Service is controlled by the extraterrestrial alliance. The FBI is controlled by the extraterrestrial alliance. The Supreme Court is controlled by the extraterrestrial alliance. The Congress is controlled by the extraterrestrial alliance. The police themselves are controlled or controllable by the extraterrestrial alliance as needed. In this context, when you ask the question, who was behind the Kennedy assassination, We can tell you that if the extraterrestrial alliance wanted him alive, he would still be alive, despite the oil billionaires with an axe to grind, the political figures with personal agendas for advancement of their own careers, those who hated the Democrat Party, those who hated the Kennedys and felt shoved aside. All of those in the CIA who chafed under the retribution launched against them because of their failures and the backlash from the Kennedys because of the Bay of Pigs, for example. All of those who had a plausible agenda, including the crime syndicate, who were under the gun because of Bobby Kennedy's aggressive attacks legally to undermine their operations. All those figures who had plausible reasons to be involved in the assassination were in turn created to be in opposition by the extraterrestrial alliance. This is what they do, and this is how they operate. So the depravity, the criminality, the negativity of human is all owing to them and the dark spirit cohort who corrupted them originally and who corrupt human as well to create all levels of inner discord they can arrange. So the stage was set. This was deliberately planned. It was not the action of a lone nut. Lee Harvey Oswald was not a shooter. He was not a co-conspirator. He was a handy scapegoat and truly a patsy, as he himself perceived when he became the focus of the investigation. He was the key because his workplace fit in being at the assassination scene. His history being shady fit perfectly. His communist leanings he carefully cultivated and established as a secret agent working for the military intelligence became an obvious assumption as motive. And so this was completely engineered and orchestrated to end the Kennedy administration and favor a greater control by the military and intelligence community to serve the extraterrestrial alliance with further destabilization of international relations. That was the game they truly wanted. They wanted war between the Soviet Union at that time and the United States of America, a global thermonuclear war that would devastate humanity. Kennedy was in the way. It was that simple. So he was taken out. This was done with a team of shooters, none of whom were Lee Harvey Oswald. The evidence was altered, sequestered, and ultimately disappeared that would have shown the true state of his body, the wounds themselves, and how it fit with the location of those who participated. So the evidence is still there to show there was corruption and a deliberate suppression. No one at those levels who were involved were ignorant in forensic analysis of bullet wounds. This was attributed to high-level figures being involved with his autopsy who were not conversant with forensics. Nothing could be further from the truth. Forensic analysis is very much a part of the necessity to pathologists working for the military as it is in the civilian sector. There are crimes committed with weapons all the time taking place on military bases. There are many other instances of vendettas occurring. The so-called fragging of officers during times of war, where soldiers will kill superior officers for revenge or other purposes, all of which needs to be analyzed and investigated. All involved were capable of sifting through and assigning the likely origin and the directions from which the firing occurred. All of this was suppressed. It was done through duress and through mind control manipulation to make those involved complacent so they could be at the center of an international event and have the goods on what the truth represented and look the other way. This is the hallmark of mind control. Most people would crack under that kind of pressure, if only in having guilty knowledge and not having complicity with knowledge of forethought. So this entire event was done to alter the course of history and to seek revenge for the obstruction, as it was perceived, in thwarting the plans of the extraterrestrial alliance to use the power of the United States to trigger warfare. This happens over and over again when there is an administration with figures who are standing strong and have a spiritual alignment, whether religious or not. There will be attempts to work around them. And if that fails, assassination becomes a convenient strategy. This was entirely a non-human orchestrated event, but done through human players who were manipulated directly and indirectly by those under the control of extraterrestrial handlers. This is hard for people to understand and conceive of, but we reassure you that it is very, very true. People whose minds are being manipulated are not aware of this. You think your thoughts and accept them as your own. You are used to changing your mind, particularly when new information comes along. And you may even breathe a sigh of relief that now you are in the know and you need not maintain that false idea you believed the day before. It may well be the case the new information is entirely false. but appears real to you because it is presented in a certain way and accepted as reality, and your new beliefs may be faulty as a consequence, but you are happy and satisfied that you know what you need to know, and you are very confident of your opinions on the matter. This is how the world functions. And you see this very graphically in the political divide, where the left and the right are nowhere near one another. Both are irrelevant to the true reality taking place. Both are convinced their views are not only correct, but very much relevant and germane to the current issues facing society. Both are truly misguided and being handled through manipulation to adopt their views in the first place and to reinforce them and to believe in them totally as a cause célèbre. They are being totally duped, but both believe they have a noble purpose and an agenda and are in service to that, and that it will help humanity. When on both sides, it is a total misdirection, a squandering of resources and human capital. There are always ways to engineer things. The Kennedy assassination was engineered to look like a last-minute impulse, a coincidental opportunity for this world leader to be in front of the workplace of someone unbalanced who owned a rifle. And then it just happened because he was in that mood to kill, had a grievance of one kind or another, the right political background to show he was untrustworthy, traitorous, unbalanced, impulsive, and a troubled person emotionally. All of the hallmarks of a lone nut who will rise to criminality in a display of irrationality, showing they were dangerous all along, and if we only knew, things might have been different. This is a scenario that plays out daily in mass killings and is all owing to manipulation by dark spirits and extraterrestrial alliance manipulation to push people over the edge. They may be people prone to criminality, prone to using firearms, prone to even wanting the death of others. But to push them to act is a manipulation. In the case of the Kennedy assassination, many of the players who contributed to the saga were manipulated into position to make them culpable. And it was not their conscious desire to be in this swirl of events, but it was seen to. And this included everyone involved in the chain of evidence who contributed to not following standards, not following protocol, manipulating those who sought the truth, misdirecting, deceiving, and causing evidence, in fact, to disappear. It was always done in the belief there was a high purpose and a justification, when in fact it was an act of criminality and a complicity with the broad conspiracy itself. This is the extent to which people can be twisted and will serve a dark cause. But without full conscious awareness, this is happening. Under such circumstances, people cannot be relied on to be witnesses even to their own conduct, particularly with regard to motive. Things just happen, and they do not fully understand it themselves. So this was what was behind the killing of Oswald. This too was orchestrated by a hapless patsy who had the requisite background to serve this purpose and make it seem like it was just an unfortunate lapse in security in someone who is inherently unstable, prone to violent temper outbursts, who often carried a gun by habit, was in close proximity to Oswald. And then the world, unfortunately, lost a prime witness in the form of the supposed shooter himself. And the events were carefully orchestrated to maintain this illusion that it was an impulsive act by an unstable person, when in fact it was manipulated and caused to happen with careful planning, and with planning in advance as well as a contingency. So the plan did not take place perfectly. It did not happen exactly as intended. There were loose ends. But the extraterrestrial alliance does not need to worry, because whatever happens, they will then go in and take action to threaten witnesses, to kill witnesses who cannot be manipulated and controlled, or to cause memory to shift and erode in useful ways for them. And so through a combination of oversight and manipulation, they can manage the aftermath of their excesses and then use the ensuing chaos to further advantage, to erode confidence in institutions, to harm all of the people involved in various ways who feel they let down others, they failed their duty, they acted inappropriately, they fell short, and on and on. The aftermath of this event was gigantic for many, many on the scene who were involved officially. All of the personal injury and damage adds to the fun for the extraterrestrial alliance and further drags down a portion of humanity. All those watching the events unfold who became disheartened saw the world as a much darker and sadder world, contributed to the alien agenda. This is what they wish to see. They want to drag humanity down, and they will go to these lengths to see it happens.
Okay, thank you. Was Dr. Green, as noted in many MK Ultra testimonies, an alias for Joseph Mengele, and was Mengele included in the same manner as many of the Nazi paperclip subjects?
This is yet another dark chapter in human history and in the history of the military and intelligence apparatus, being as it is under control of the extraterrestrial alliance. Who could envision this kind of shared depravity? But this is very much true. Mengele was brought to the United States of America courtesy of the U.S. military. He was given an alias, he was protected, he was housed, he was fed, and he was paid a salary to work for the United States government. And what was he doing? Torture and subjugation of innocent human lives, very much akin to what he did at Auschwitz with his research, resulting in the killing of his subjects. This was not quite the setting or the operation while in the U.S., but many, many lives were changed forever and essentially ended with respect to their happiness once they went into the mind control programs he was assisting. His role was to advance the creation of humans that could be manipulated through the production of dissociation via torture, and to create within them various personas that could be called forward and be used as useful operatives for various strategies. So this was a way to take a human being, fragment their mind, and in effect weaponize them to take on various roles within society that would be only within the knowledge of that portion of the personality triggered to emerge and take on various instructions and carry out a mission. Then submerge once again into the deep recesses of the mind, leaving the primary day-to-day portion of that person's awareness completely in the dark. They had been somewhere doing things that may have included targeted killing. In this fashion, they created many, many human assassins and sex slaves and covert intelligence operatives and various individuals used for dark purposes to commit thefts, to carry out acts of sabotage, to undermine political organizations, and to go internationally and manipulate people in other nations and contribute to mischief far and wide. This became a giant program, and he did contribute materially to its operation and to the research phase that allowed greater sophistication. He helped them by being more ruthless, and this proved to be very, very rewarding. There were always concerns about going too far with the level of pain involved. For example, when you put a psychopath in charge of administering pain, this changes the nature of what can happen. And this became a new dark standard in the fragmentation because of the extreme levels of pain and savagery utilized to carry out this dark agenda. This is one of the darkest and most sordid examples of the influence of extraterrestrial alliance within the heart of functioning of human culture, when those most trusted with the most sensitive of secrets and to carry out the most delicate and sensitive intelligence operations where there is so much hanging in the balance that it be done deftly and smoothly and without detection and for the benefit of the nation and many times of the so-called free world, to have those individuals carrying out acts of lawlessness, the promulgation of sex trafficking, massive drug dealing, clandestine arms sales, to the most savage and unstable nations and non-nation players who are bent on destruction, is the most extreme example of being suppressed and subjugated. And this is the legacy of the alliance between the extraterrestrials and the military, that far from working covertly, they are working hand in hand through their operatives directly to create policy, to promote technologies and procedures and practices to serve the darkness ever more effectively. This has grown particularly within the technological arena, where so much is done with targeted energies of all kinds, used as weapons, used as tools of manipulation, used as tools of destabilization of natural phenomena that indirectly harm human, and the massive programming done relentlessly through all the media. It is orchestrated through human hands at some level. And this, again, is done through mind control manipulation. So the players themselves have but a dim awareness of their involvement and are unaware who is truly behind it. They are simply carrying out instructions of their supervisor and following an inner shielding to keep them from thinking deeply about their activities and the implications. Someone like Mengele was serving directly because of the inner nature of his being. He was someone out of alignment and was himself disconnected and in the grip of depravity. To put such individuals in charge of research programs and to model after them is very, very telling as to the true purpose behind having secret agents and agencies with broad reach and secret budgets that are massive and wholly trusted to engage in implementation of policy, to make things happen, to orchestrate many, many things, and to be the active arm of politics. This is an extremely dangerous situation and has created many, many problems for human society. This is why the problem is so great and the situation so dire. Those to whom you would turn for assistance are the very ones from whom you need shielding and protection. The foxes are in the hen house already, so to speak, and you do not even know this. Your friend is truly your foe. Your treasured leadership is your enemy incarnate. This is the depth to which things have sunk. And this will take all you can do and more to create a potential rescue. This is why divine help is so very needed. This is greater than human can solve or cope with. And the reason is all are corrupt. So there is no one you can trust, no one in authority or in power who will listen and who will respond in a meaningful way, or who will not, in fact, turn against you as a troublemaker and cause you harm through some kind of backlash. These are difficult and dangerous times. This has always been true coming into human existence. Those who remain sheep may be harmed along the way. Those who cause trouble for the powers that be will be first in line to be reckoned with. So this is a delicate matter, and again speaks to the need for divine intervention. So humans do not have to be standing with a weapon on the frontier and take on these powerful forces personally and directly to put themselves in harm's way. We do not advocate this. If you work through divine realm, knowledge, information, encouragement, and the request of divine assistance in combination, so your requests have meaning and definition and specific examples of what you see to be wrong and want to be different, all can inform and empower the divine realm to do its utmost for human betterment.
Okay, thank you. What can you tell us about the involvement of the Extraterrestrial Alliance in the 9/11 operation?
This was entirely orchestrated by the Extraterrestrial Alliance, again, through human complicity in part. There were patsies involved as well. The so-called hijackers were not the true hijackers. The evidence of this has been suppressed. If you go and look for this, you will not find it, other than in the official announcements and the wanted posters. But the true forensic evidence of the trail of events and who was on those planes and who was not will not match. And that is because the Extraterrestrial Alliance can be sloppy, because they have the FBI to cover up the evidence. They have the official government to create a false narrative and a false explanation, and a set of patsies to blame, when in fact this is done purposefully with much planning and much sophistication as well, although not perfect. This was done via a combination of extraterrestrial forces to take care of the operation and ensure its success. So the aircraft involved were flown remotely, not by human pilots. The people on board the aircraft were removed via extraterrestrial technology. So the ability to fly them into the buildings was never in doubt. It was seen to. Nothing was left to chance of an essential nature for the successful collision of those aircraft with their targets. There was the one plane that got away, and that was due to timely human action overpowering the humans who were the true hijackers to take initial control of the airplanes. So that was a failing of the original planning. But ultimately, the plan went extremely well and benefited the extraterrestrial alliance hugely in creating an entire new set of wars that have continued to this very day, none of which had a reason that is logical or any connection to the events of 9/11, directly or indirectly. The entire association with the Islamic Jihad was a propaganda construction, because this was a military operation carried out in conjunction with the U.S. military and the extraterrestrial alliance and their technological capabilities. They saw to it that there was not a military protective response to the incursion of aircraft in restricted airspace, even with what should have been ample warning of errant flights where hijackings were underway. There was not a prompt military response. This was because of the usual minding of those responders to misdirect them. This was one level of the manipulation. The actual destruction of the towers was not as advanced by many conspiracy theorists as being a controlled demolition via planted explosives. They were reacting to the intuitive awareness that these buildings should not have fallen in the way they did. So they get an A for effort. And this is a very common occurrence when people know the truth of things because they see intuitively the official stories are wrong. There is something more sinister taking place. And then we'll advance a plausible explanation that has a realistic and often prosaic explanation as to the mechanism or process involved. In this case, why two buildings hit with an aircraft with the typical quick response by the fire departments and a quite and largely successful evacuation of the buildings. There could not have been time for containment. And to have both buildings destroyed in this process was, in fact, designed out in the very beginning, in the design of the buildings themselves. They were created with the awareness of a possibility that even a major airliner might inadvertently go off course or through engine failure plummet into one of these structures, they were designed to withstand such an eventuality, yet they crumbled. And this was carried out through the direction of a kind of energy targeted from a cloaked alien craft hovering above the World Trade Center. It was invisible to the eye and not visible on photographs either. But this direction of energy is what caused the virtual disintegration of the buildings themselves. So when they collapsed, they did not collapse as would happen with a controlled demolition, as you see in the many movies of such events, when an old structure of considerable size even needs to be removed to allow a new building in its place. And so the controlled demolition is used to shatter key structural elements, and then the various floors of the building pancake onto one another and collapse through accumulating weight into a giant debris pile. That did not happen on 9/11 and is demonstrable in the videos and still photographs, and even in the seismographic data that inadvertently captured the signature of the collapse. It was far too rapid, and it was far too mild in its seismic consequences and in terms of the damage at the ground level. The massive tonnage of these buildings did not collapse and compress through a pancaking operation from the disruption of necessary beams and so forth. The buildings turned to dust because they were pulverized by extraterrestrial energy beamed downward into these structures. This encompassed adjacent buildings as well, which all were destroyed and had bizarre damage that has no plausible explanation either. The list of anomalous occurrences goes on and on and on and on, including the fact that more than 1,000 vehicles burst into flame in odd ways, as much as a half a mile away from the towers themselves. This is a good example of the ability of mind control manipulation to maintain complacency and to keep things secret. With dozens of bizarre anomalies that cannot be explained in a conventional sense, for them all to happen in conjunction with a single event of this kind, and then be completely overlooked and suppressed by all of the media, as well as the investigation officially by the government with the promulgation of an official report to document what happened and why. And none of these details are addressed. Shows the degree of control. The public as well accepted everything at face value and did not look back. To be sure, after a time, people recoiled at the very memory of the event, and all were cast under the pall of potential destruction. because the fear level was so high. Who would be next? What building in one's hometown would be going? Would more planes do the same thing once air traffic resumed? And on and on and on. The world is in flames now, still, because of this orchestrated event. It was entirely a false flag operation engineered by the secret government, whatever you want to call it, minions of the extraterrestrial alliance, and with very direct extraterrestrial participation in this case to achieve this technological feat. So this gives you the broad outline here. The many players and their stories are innumerable, but there is no audience because people have already moved on. That is a powerful testament to the ability to suppress what is right under one's nose and to have the mind not allow a question to be asked. People will turn away in disinterest with any mention of this information. And this is how the secrets are maintained, by attributing it entirely to conspiracy theorists, a pejorative term created by the CIA to help tar the reputation of scholars with a true human interest in ferreting out the truth, who look at contradictory information and ask why this is so. And then they are dismissed with the label conspiracy theorist, or that they are wearing a tinfoil hat. And often their inability to frame the questions and in coming up with implausible but human level alternative explanations fall short, become their own worst enemy at times, and then are easily dismissed. But people are not looking at reality for what it is. It does not need a precise explanation to know that something is not right here. And if that becomes the focus and becomes a rallying cry, those who do know, who can fill in the detail, will have an audience, and there will be a path to greater awareness and an awakening of others. This is what we are hoping to accomplish in providing some support for the scholarship of many seekers of truth who have probed into the events of 9/11 and are pointing very clearly at all the holes in the official story. And they are legion. It is that no one is looking. The media have moved on, and they are all controlled, and they will not go back and review this either. This is not human. And the reason is human impulse and desire is being subjugated in service to those wanting the secrets kept.
Okay, thank you. What happened to the occupants of the aircraft that were used for this attack?
Some were killed outright. Some remain imprisoned and are being used in various ways. Some were used as food. So this, again, shows you the range of possible destinies humans have when they engage with the extraterrestrials. They may have a time when they are a useful stooge and carry out an agenda on their behalf, and even have their regular human life to go home to at the end of the day. But eventually, those are the destinies. A kind of sequestration, confinement, imprisonment, to be used as a slave or to be used as food. These are the three ultimate destinies for those humans allowed to live, because they may have some useful purpose, although low level. Death is a better fate than to remain alive in their hands. Those who have died in many ways have a better outcome. There are some who are trapped in between planes of existence, and this is a great misfortune as well, but need not be forever. The torment and subjugation go on. So these victims who were on those flights were certainly victims and remain victims. And they are in desperate straits, no matter their individual destiny. They all need healing and assistance, those among the living and even some who died along the way through extermination. So this is the saga you can expect to have with a human extraterrestrial encounter. You may survive it if it suits them, but that is always conditional and always uncertain. And the fate eventually is already planned to not work out in your favor. You have been told the truth here, both by the interviewers of me and what I am saying to you as well. This gives us no great pleasure in describing the difficulty here and the kind of suffering that continues. But this is the way things are, and it is up to human to change it.
Okay, thank you. This is my last question. When incarnated as L. Fletcher Prouty, you were exposed to and very familiar with public opinion manipulations conducted by the deep state, the CIA, and perhaps even the extraterrestrial alliance. Now that you are a light being, what can you tell us about what is known as the full disclosure movement and the ideas being put forth about an impending event that will remove the cabal and usher in a new age of enlightenment, new technologies, and freedom for humans on Earth?
What we have been saying throughout this discourse about the total control of extraterrestrial alliance of human institutions applies across the board to most individuals as well. There are very, very few, even among the spiritual community, who are not within their grip and being manipulated to keep them from doing useful work. There are many false narratives being promoted and agendas with great promise for humanity that are modeled after Creator's plan for the ascension of human to a higher level of functioning and a broader expansion, including throughout the universe, of human presence in an exalted form and an expanded form in many, many respects. You are living very much akin within a kind of plan involving metamorphosis. You are, as a physical human, more like the larva that has yet to form a safe haven to incubate and transform itself into something of greater magnificence that can truly soar. This is yet to come. This idea is being repurposed by the extraterrestrial alliance to dangle it in front of many, to give them the impression this will happen and is to be expected, and for which they really need to do nothing personally. Nothing could be farther from the truth. This metamorphosis will not happen unless the opposition of the extraterrestrial alliance itself is dealt with successfully, because it is too great a drain on human and too great an obstruction of human thought and intention. There must be a change here to allow human progress, to tell people that it is coming and to watch the skies, to look for signs. All of this is a disempowerment because it presumes the future will be positive when this is undecided. And it also promotes the idea of human complacency. So no one is alarmed, no one is concerned, no one needs to worry. What could be better, except that it is an entirely false message that undermines human, because they need to be taking action, each and every person. And the action needed is to enlist the help of the divine realm, the true divine realm, not a surrogate, a semblance, a false notion, a limited perspective. People are taught and trained now to view themselves as divine figures. This is the case. This is true. But as physical humans, you do not have a divine reach. It is that simple. You cannot summon miracles unilaterally. Meditating, wanting help from the light with no further definition or concept of divinity as the true being you wish to connect to, will do nothing. It will give you something to do with your time. You may even feel good while you are doing it, and you may feel virtuous. But you will be a voice talking to yourself. The divine realm will hear you, but you are not inviting them to do anything. You are inviting light to do something. Light has no purpose to serve you, nor will your energy summon it and repurpose it. There are limits to human power and human thought. You have divine power within. You have divine healing power within. But it is in modest supply because you have been rejiggered by the extraterrestrial alliance to make it so. You have been dimmed down. You have been altered. You have been neutered, in a sense, to have a limited reach. That serves them. To think you can do this yourself is a false notion. We do not wish to take further power away from you, because your divinity can be expressed through partnership with the divine source that created you and from which you are an extension, literally. But you must ask for this by name. You must have it in your intention. Otherwise, you are buying a false narrative that is sugarcoating human weakness to make it seem that anything can happen. And this is not the case. The idea of the disclosure movement is an extraterrestrial alliance plot to intrigue people with the possibility of finally having the extraterrestrials come out into the open so we can find out all the secrets that have been going on, what the government knows that it's protecting us from because we're not sophisticated enough to accept extraterrestrials and so on. This is all a dodge. It's all a subterfuge to keep the game going. The disclosure movement is a sinister attempt to manipulate humans further to allow a more active presence and participation both in human society of the extraterrestrials. It will be done with a cover story that it is intended to help humanity and finally bring forth the advent of advanced thinking and advanced management under the assumption that such an advanced civilization through chronology and successful accumulation of advanced technology must have figured out the answer to war and crime and human troubles and even problems of illness and aging, and will be a logical savior to help us from ourselves, because we clearly cannot run things. If you look at the disarray and the many conflicts at all levels of society, this is all part of a plan to create the chaos and the discord, to disenchant people with human capability, to make you feel small and unable to cope, to give you problems that are seemingly insoluble. And that is all management from behind the scenes, to allow you only to come up with solutions that work partially or not at all, to create more chaos than you can cope with, because they're simply able to do this. It is not humans causing the trouble, it is them. When they come forward with a solution, it is to further dupe you into trusting them. This will be a colossal mistake, and it will end in the undoing of humanity if this is allowed to happen. This you do not want to see be the end and final chapter. After the many thousands of years of contribution and participation personally on the part of most humans in the human enterprise, to reach a point when the extraterrestrials are still on top and then use human to annihilate themselves, this would be a final irony and a testament to human failure. This is the choice: success or failure of the human enterprise. You are up against powerful foes, but you have far greater power in the divine realm you can summon. They cannot, because they are non-believers. This is the difference between you and them. If you have a spiritual alignment and an awareness and an inner knowing of the reality of a divine creator, you have much more potential power because you can ask Creator for help and receive help. They cannot ask because they do not believe. This is the end result of atheism. It is the degradation in service to greater pleasures through advanced technology and an erosion in morality, ending with an environment and civilization designed around the power achieved and maintained through a hierarchy of greater and greater force in service to the self and not the collective good. If it serves the self to have minions who are complacent, they can be given tidbits to maintain that complacency. This is not the same as living through joy, living through happiness, and enjoying the bliss of being with a loving God who cherishes you and gives you greater treasures and powers beyond the imagining, even of these advanced extraterrestrial beings. That is your origin and your true destiny if you choose it. You are at a turning point and a decision point that will decide the fate of humanity. This has been brought by your interlopers, not the doings of humanity per se. But humanity can resist and can have a partnership with the divine to overcome these forces. You need divine help to do this. You must request it. You've heard this again and again from your compatriots here who have given us a chance to speak with you. If we sing the same tune, it is because that is the hymn of freedom. That is the hymn of the divine realm, singing through them, informing them, enlightening them, encouraging them, and responding to their true and genuine and heartfelt desire to understand the truth and to be in service to the divine as well, because they feel the flow of divine love within them. They see it at work through the eyes of others. All who can feel and express love are in the flow of the divine. Everything that takes love away is coming from the darkness that wishes to intrude and overpower the remaining vestiges of loving beings who are still awake among you. There are enough to make the difference if all will take action. That is our message for you, to vote with your heart and with your mind and intention, to ask the almighty forces of holiness, of sacred origins, to come and assist with the uplifting of all humans and non-humans both, to bring love in, to raise all up and allow a change in direction away from subjugation and death. So all can live and all can coexist. There is room for all in this universe. There need not be predators and prey on this scale. And this can change if you choose for it to happen and take action.
Okay, thank you for answering all these questions. And with that, I'd like to ask Karl to come back. Fletcher wrote 2 more books.
Well, he knows a lot, and he has a lot of karmic interconnections with this whole saga, because he wasn't on the sidelines. He was on the frontier in different ways, serving different agendas. But that gives him authority, and that's the reason he can speak to us in particular and share some intimate details, because he's, in a sense, he's gained that authority through his personal involvement. So he has a stake in it. And it's the case that when you create a problem, you can fix it. This is always true, and it's inherent in the way the universe works. Mm-hmm. So he is able, even from beyond the veil, to come in to some extent and help right the wrongs in a way another being might not, because they were maybe on the sidelines during their life and never had a hand directly in things. And so there's no personal stake, to the extent that he has.
Right.
So quite sobering. It's hard to not be speechless after that was quite a grand tour of calamity. And
there was one question in here that I was going to replace, and I guess it was in the edit that didn't come out that when I printed it. But if we ever go back to him, I'm going to include it. And I think it was a question that I was going to replace number 2. Number 2 was, in terms of undisclosed and secret operations involving the extraterrestrial alliance, what are the major differences between the Air Force, the Navy, and the CIA? And the one that I wanted to put in there in its place, I don't know why, I guess when I saved it, it didn't auto-save. Anyway, what I wanted to put in there was, why was the Vietnam War prosecuted so vigorously? Because that was apparently a big part of what he claimed was the reason that Kennedy was killed, because they really didn't want this peace. Kennedy had announced that he was going to bring all the U.S. Soldiers, home. By 1965, he was going to have everybody out of there. And that was one thing in his book, I guess in both books, but mostly in the JFK assassination book he wrote. He said that was a big part of their motivation to get him out of the picture, because he was, they had done a lot of preparatory work there in Vietnam to get that war going. But anyway, that's the one question I wish that I would have asked in place of that other one. Because we got some pretty good new insights on this. I think most notably, the one the viewers are going to really key in on is his visit to Antarctica. And I was expecting that was just Lansdale's way of getting Fletcher Prouty, out of country, just like Kennedy's whole cabinet was off to Japan, when the assassination occurred. A lot of key people weren't in Washington when that happened, or even in the country. But he was down there for something else, which was this alien extraterrestrial base in Antarctica.
Well, this was something that clearly unfolded for him, where he was brought into those circles. So he had the awareness of this alliance, and it had been going on for some time before he came along, and and of course it's gone on all through history.
Right.
It's just a question of individuals and whether they bump into it,
right,
or get involved in the power circles, and that's where it's more likely to be apparent. But for the most part, it's all behind the scenes for most people in government and in the military as well. It's very compartmentalized. It's not like universally known. You can't stop a GI in the street and get him to spill the beans. They'll look at it like you're nuts.
Right.
very honestly, because they don't know anything about this. It's a need to know kind of thing, and it's done through mind manipulation. So this is the irony of this disclosure thing, that they're coming to tell you to trust these people who have been trained to be a mercenary army for the extraterrestrial alliance, and maybe put them in charge, to police things. This is not a good idea.
No.
It's very scary. It's a very scary thing.
Yeah.
And it looks very innocent on the surface. And so it's those people who are directly involved who are most manipulated.
Yeah.
Because they have to be, to
Right.
keep the lid on it. And those who are peripheral, they're just given a kind of a general complacency programming, which is for everybody. So we hardly get alarmed at things, and if we do, we're given something to direct our ire towards. Like right now, it's guns. We got to hate the NRA because they're about guns, and we hate guns. That's, the most superficial way of looking at the fact that there's a school shooting now almost once a week in the United States of America. Well, it's not guns leaping out of their drawers and marching down to schools and doing that. So the reasons why are really what people should be looking at.
Yeah, so what you need to do is open your drawers and check for aliens.
Well, that might not be a bad idea.
Because they're in there.
Well, these things happen for a reason. Trust me.
Right. And I think he didn't pull any punches when we asked him, on 9/11, on the Kennedy assassination. And I think we would have found a very similar answer if I'd asked about the Vietnam War. And I'm sorry I didn't ask that question, but I think we got a pretty good tour of the underbelly, as it were. So, Karl, I know you have a busy day ahead of you, as I do, and we're into it, as you predicted, over 2 hours. And so I just want to thank you for doing this. And if you have any last words, please take an opportunity now to just let us know what's on your mind, and then we'll say goodbye.
Well, I won't pontificate. I can't do a better job than he did in giving all the brushstrokes to this whole giant mess that we're embroiled in. But if you listen to these words and entertain the possibility that it's true, at least you can see why Denny and I are doing this. When you are privy to this kind of knowledge, you have two choices. Well, at least two. One of which is, I think this is bullshit, and walking away or running away.
Yeah.
Because the people might be dangerous, imbalanced and so on. And, I can tell you I'm not unbalanced, and I don't think Denny is, but any insane person will tell you the same thing. This is part of the problem. See how clever this is, to use insanity as a cover story for all sorts of dark doings. I work with a lot of people who are certifiable because they come to me because they have spirit attachments and so on. And they do. Some of them have extraterrestrial involvement, and they'll tell you this. And they do. They might also be mentally unbalanced. But they got that way because they were manipulated into it. This is a distortion of humans. So we're just trying to be honest here. So personally, my parting words would be, I'm just trying to do my best to bring in information and not filter it and not judge it.
Right.
Is what it is. And it springs from us and what we know, because the divine realm can't leap out in front of us and spill all the beans to us. It's on our heads to figure out most of it.
Right.
So we at least can see the signs of what's going wrong and what is it we need.
Yeah, understand the problem so we can apply the solution. That's
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's true for everyone else watching this. The ball's in your court now. What else can we do? We only have so much influence, so much of a reach, so big a following. Each person hearing this has heard this call again and again today. Reach out to the divine. Talk to God. Ask God for help. Help out. All of us help me personally and my loved ones to stand strong, to keep our hearts pure, to bring love in for us and everyone else. So it's up to you guys now to move the ball forward.
Right. Right.
Um,
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Karl. And there'll be links and descriptions and whatnot, how to get a hold of me, of Karl, how to look at, if you want to do more research on Prouty, who was an amazing fellow, not only in the light, but when he was living. He exposed a lot of information. And so, I just want to thank you again, Karl, for doing this. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us today. And we'll be back. Bye-bye. All righty.